I want to start by thanking Robin and her colleagues at the ABA Death Penalty Representation Project. Robin's remarks initially used the word hero, and I can't think of a more apt word for that tonight. Because Robin, you and your staff are indeed heroes, and we are all so grateful for the work that you do. In fact, since this work can be so difficult, as I think all of you know, one of the things that one looks for in it is, in fact, a search for heroes, because they are easy to find in the death penalty world. Excuse me. Many of them, of course, are here tonight. People like David Kendall and Seth Waxman, Ron Flagg, so many others. And there are so many others that aren't here tonight, but I'm sure many of you have encountered them. People like Sister Helen Pragine that I was lucky enough to welcome into my home a few years ago, who reminded me, Phil, we are all abolitionists, and just like the abolitionists of the early 19th century, we will prevail in time. Other people like Brian Stevenson, my good friend Steve Bright, who I'm sure is a good friend of many of you here tonight. And he was on my list already, Justice Stevens, a hero to so many of us tonight. And I hope the rules of ethics allow me to do this, Justice Stevens, because I know from my firm we'd like to thank you personally for your decision in the Troy Davis case a couple of years ago. And there's some new heroes tonight that I want to point out that you're going to hear more about. They are, of course, the law firms of Dorsey and Whitney and Fredrickson and Byron. And to the representative of those firms, I want to say that we and Arnold Porter are honored to be grouped together with you tonight. Robin also used the word celebration at the beginning of her remarks. And I can tell you something we have to celebrate tonight, because including some of the colleagues that are sitting over on our table have just won a new sentencing hearing at the state habeas level in a Pennsylvania case for a client, Henry Daniels of ours, just a few days ago, and we are all so happy about that. I ask you to thank the members of the team who are over here. But of course, as we all know, celebrations can sometimes seem few and far between in this work. You go into these cases knowing how they very well may end up. I know I personally will never forget the night 12 years ago when I sat on a folding chair outside my client's cell and then stood to hold his hands through the bars of his cell as a chaplain administered a final communion moments before I was ushered into a small room to watch him put to death. It can be a tough world out there, and we are facing another tough case, the Troy Davis case that I just mentioned. For Troy is scheduled to be executed by the state of Georgia precisely from this moment. The rest of the team is also sitting at that table, and very shortly after this reception, we'll all be heading down to Georgia in preparation for a clemency hearing on Monday morning. We will be all right, but I do ask you to keep Troy, for whom there is such overwhelming evidence of innocence, in your thoughts this next week as we take one last stab at justice for him. Yes, it is a tough system. All of you who have been through these cases know how arbitrary and capricious it can be. We face a set of Byzantine rules which seem designed at times only to block justice and to make sure that rights are not enforced. And this was well encapsulated by yet another hero of the death penalty and a personal hero of mine, the legendary constitutional law professor at Yale, Charles Black. Some of you who know him, or knew him, he's gone now, may recall that he was he was the only white Southerner on Thurgood Marshall's legal team that litigated Brown versus the Board of Education. And he went on to make a name for himself in all areas of constitutional law. And in the late 70s, he wrote a book on capital punishment called The Inevitability of Caprice and Mistake, detailing just how irrational the system is and just how, as Justice Blackmun would later put it, there was no possible way to tinker with the machinery of death to make it work right. So to me, the most inspiring words of the death penalty come from the end of his book, and I'd like to share with you right now. The law of Moses is full of the death penalty, But as time went on, the court in ancient Jerusalem, without, of course, touching one syllable of this law, devised procedural safeguards so refined, so difficult of satisfying, that the penalty of death could only very rarely be exacted. So approved was this process that it is said in the Talmud that when one rabbi called destructive a Sanhedrin that imposed one death sentence in 7 years, another rabbi said once in 70 years, and 2 others said that had they been on that great court, no death sentence would ever have been carried out. And Black went on to say, I think the rabbis, in surrounding the punishment of death with nearly unsatisfiable procedural safeguards, were groping, or perhaps unconsciously moving, toward a truth reached by the quoted remark of the 2 last mentioned. To put it in terms that they might naturally have used, I think they were saying at last, though the justice of God may indeed ordain that some should die, the justice of man is altogether and always insufficient for saying who these may be. I think we all know that lesson, and I ask you to keep fighting the fight until we can match that ancient court. Thank you very much.